So my name is Anthony Chan. I am the manager of training and data services here at the ARC, and I've been working here for about 13 years, if not more. I've honestly lost track at this point, but I'm thrilled to be with you guys. Honestly, this is my favorite part of the job, being able to talk to parents, educators, and other professionals in our field and just talking about really good information, sharing resources. Just to tell you a little bit about what we're here to do today. If you're brand new to this series, we are the ARC of Pennsylvania. So we are a nonprofit agency that really focuses on advocating for the rights and needs of people with disabilities here in Pennsylvania. And more specifically, we work for the Include Me program. It's one of the programs run by the ARC, but our whole spiel is to really support Pennsylvania schools and becoming more inclusive for people with disabilities. And a big part of that is by providing technical assistance and training for families, educators, and other school staff that might need help when working with students with disabilities. And a big piece of that is doing outreach through these transition webinars that we hold once a month. These are going to be less technically oriented, but we are going to be covering really important topics we want young families and educators to think about as their kids move to that transition age, so that 14 to 21 age range. And today we're going to spend our lunch just talking a little bit about social skills. I know this is a time of big change for students as they graduate. Maybe they're moving from elementary school to middle school, or they're getting ready to graduate high school. In any scenario, we always have to work on our social skills. And I think this is a really good and interesting topic to talk about because sometimes it gets overlooked a little bit in my experience. So let's dive into it. So before we go any further, I do want to mention that this training is a safe zone. So feel free to share your thoughts and ideas openly without any fear or negative feedback. This is a Zoom webinar, so your webcams and your microphones are disabled by default, but you can use the chat feature to communicate with us and everyone else on this live stream. And if you're joining us through social media like Facebook, Celia will be there to help monitor your chats and get you links and resources and answer your questions as well. And so you will have ways to communicate with us. Plus, we will have a Q&A section at the end. So just a quick roadmap. We're going to spend roughly 30 minutes talking about social skills for students. And then we will transition into a Q&A section that will not be recorded. So you're free to just share whatever information you need at the very end. And we encourage you to jump onto the Zoom call for that, as we typically don't live stream that portion. But if you have questions, feel free to share them in the chat and we'll get back to you as best we can. So let's dive into it. I want to be respectful of your time here. I know we're all on our lunch break. So let's start talking about social skills. What are social skills? Now, I know when I first hear about social skills, I'm really thinking about how awkward I am and how uncomfortable I can be in many scenarios and how I can be kind of be a little bit awkward, especially when talking verbally, right? That's probably my first think about social skills is how I verbally communicate with others and how I feel talking to others in a bunch of different scenarios, right? But social skills actually encompass a lot more if we think about it. It's about using appropriate language, right? The social context we're in plays a huge role in what is considered appropriate or not, right? The language I might use at home or with friends is probably going to be a little bit different than how I talk at work or in school. So helping our kids understand what is appropriate in each scenario is going to be really helpful, especially as they get ready to graduate and they're going to get exposed to many, many complex social scenarios, whether they're trying to network for that job or attending a social event at college or just going out in the community and running errands, right? There's going to be a lot of changes coming their way, and we want to prepare them as best we can. And building on that, we also want to help our kids understand social rules, right? Those unspoken rules of etiquette and how we behave ourselves in any scenario can really change. Again, I myself am very friendly with my friends, and I love to hug them when I say hi and goodbye to them. I hug my family, right? I like to be very personal with my friends. But when it comes to a work environment, let's say I am meeting with my coworkers that I don't know as well, or I'm going to a big conference, right? It might not be appropriate for me to hug everyone because not everyone's going to be comfortable with that. So just understanding what is the proper etiquette in any given scenario can also play a huge role in our child's lives. Understanding body language too, not just being able to read the person you're talking to's body language, right? Do they seem a little bit closed off, distracted, upset? But also understanding how our own body language can impact how people perceive us and influence our conversations and our communications can play a huge role whenever we are talking to people. And also communicating wants and needs, right? That actual expression of ideas, what we need, what we're trying to get out of this conversation can have a huge role. And you'll notice we use the word communicating very specifically here because we recognize you don't always communicate verbally, right? Sometimes we're texting each other. Maybe we're posting on social media or we're sending emails. Or if we're nonverbal, we might use sign language or communication apps, right? However, we communicate, we need to practice those skills so that no matter what scenario comes at us, maybe someone doesn't understand ASL, how can we still communicate with that person, right? We want to be able to communicate clearly however we can. So there's a lot of things we have to take into consideration. And the good news is there is help out there, right? And there's a lot of things we can do to take steps to prepare our kids as they get ready to graduate. Many of these things I just mentioned are probably covered in the student's IEP. And this is something we're going to talk a little bit more in a few slides here, but just recognize that the school can absolutely help, right? These can be clear goals we can build into their annual curriculum. And just recognizing that, hey, social dynamics and social rules can change once you've graduated and prepare our kids for scenarios like work, post-secondary education and college and being out in the community and preparing them specifically for these kind of common scenarios can give our kids a huge leg up, especially while they're still in school. So the earlier we can prepare them and start thinking about, well, what kind of skills will they need to communicate and work? How are they going to talk to their supervisors and ask for time off, or let them know that they're going to be sick and miss a day, or ask for that promotion, right? These are all things we can help prepare our kids now while they're still in school so that they become prepared and they can hit the ground running once they've graduated school. So, where can we learn social skills? I think there's a lot of places we can start. Obviously, schools are going to play a huge role in this, right? We can update our students' IEP to include the teaching of social skills. We can have students participate in work experiences while still in school to build up that real world experience. Our teachers, our paraprofessionals, and any other specialists that our students might work with can all take an active role and preparing them for these new scenarios once they've graduated. And if you're not familiar with them yet, I definitely encourage you to look into the Office of Voc Rehab. They are a state agency that's dedicated to helping people with disabilities find employment, especially after school. But they offer something called a pre-ETS, which is pre-employment transition services. This is actually a service designed specifically for students in high school. So while they're still in school in that 14 to 21 age range, they can actually come in and help prepare students in things like social skills, building up work skills, independent living skills, and getting them exposure to work experiences before they graduate. So we'll definitely talk more about them and how to get access to them because I know that can be tricky sometimes. So we'll definitely talk about OVR. But last but not least, you guys as parents can also take an active role in building up your child's social skills. I think this is something that's, you know, kind of gets overlooked sometimes, and I always want to encourage parents to do as much as they can to help your child prepare for life after school. And when I say overlooked, I don't mean you're dropping the ball and not teaching them that. In fact, the opposite. I think you guys probably do that every single day, but it's not something that's always highlighted enough. And so I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that yes, you guys are actively taking steps to improve your child's life And I want to guide you in that, and, in making sure that you are encouraging your child to have an active role in everyday conversations, that you're modeling behavior you want your child to learn, and especially consider role-playing scenarios with your child, whether it's with family or friends, especially in those less common scenarios that they're going to have to prepare for, right? Things like job interviews. I know I can't think of anyone who enjoys doing a job interview, right? It's pretty nerve-wracking. So the more we can prepare our kids and our loved ones for that while they're still at home or in school, the better off they'll be, the more confident they'll be, and they'll know how to behave in a professional manner and get that job that they're shooting for once they're ready to join the workforce. So we'll be talking about each one of these scenarios, and we're going to start by talking about schools. So the individualized education plan, that IEP your child or student has, can be updated at least once a year and more frequently than that if needed. And we definitely encourage you as your child is hitting that high school age range, that 14 to 21, to really think about those scenarios after school. How can we prepare them? And I know you're already thinking about skills like budgeting and finance and work experiences and how to get around the community, learn travel skills. But we also want to pay equal attention to practical scenarios like preparing for a job interview, being able to talk to your coworkers in a professional manner, going out to college if you're going to go pursue a degree or higher education. How do you talk to your counselor? How do you ask your teacher for help if you're stuck and you need to go to their office hours? How do you talk to your dorm mates or the RA if you have something that you need to address with them, or just develop those friendships with your classmates and be a productive worker in group projects, right? There's a lot of things we can prepare our child for while they're still in school. And that can be addressed directly in that social and emotional section in the IEP. So if you're a parent, I definitely encourage you to help the school identify specific goals that make sense to you and your child. Right. If you think that college is on their horizon and that's something we want to prepare them for, absolutely have that conversation with the school and think about, hey, how are they going to ask for accommodations in college? Because it looks really different than when you're in public school, right? When you're still in high school. Colleges are under different rules when it comes to providing accommodations and services. So your child might have to take a more active role in getting those accommodations and learning your rights as a college student or as an adult is going to play a huge role in that, right? Knowing what you can ask for, what is reasonable, what the college can provide, right? That's going to be huge. And if you need to enroll to help with specialists like occupational therapists, speech language support as appropriate, absolutely work with them as well, right? Get as many people involved in this process and as appropriate for your child and what their needs will be. Um, you can also ask their volunteer work experiences to help the student gain exposure to new environments and learn workplace etiquette. I know a lot of schools try to expose their students to work experiences, whether it's just helping around the office, maybe the admin office with some filing and sorting and delivering of mail. And while that is great when it comes to just those practical work skills that we can put on a resume and say, hey, our kid has been working for the school admin building and they've been doing filing for years and scanning and they know how to use a copier. That's fantastic. But you can also use this moment again to build up that workplace etiquette skill, right there, professionalism. And that can be a focus as they go through those experiences. Maybe enroll the help of the school admin staff to coach your child, right? And how do they greet each other? How do they communicate with one another? And what do they do when they're done with their work? Do they report to the supervisor, whoever is in charge of their work experience, right? So you can absolutely work on some of those softer skills, the social skills, when they're still going through this, and not even if they're also learning those work skills at the same time. So I think this is a great opportunity to start getting introduced to that work life and how we behave ourselves, right, in that professional manner. Now, Office of Voc Rehab, I mentioned it earlier. It's a state-run agency that's dedicated to helping people with disabilities find employment. And they also happen to work with students aged 14 to 21. That's actually federally mandated by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act. So PA has to provide these things. And this is a list of all the services they can provide. So you're going to have things like self-advocacy training, which is pretty much what we're talking about now, right? How do you express your wants and your needs in a productive manner? Independent living skills instruction. How can we teach our kids skills they might need to live on their own, whether it's paying their bills, getting their own groceries, right? Lots of things we can teach about being out in the community. Workplace readiness training. So this deals more with how can we prepare our kids for that job that they want? You know, how can they practice good hygiene, wear their uniform, be on time, act in a professional way? Job exploration. This is all about exploring different career opportunities available to them in their community. I'm sure many of us have had some form of job exploration while we were in school. I can think back personally to experiences where we brought in some professionals to come and talk to us about their careers, right? Even going all the way back to like kindergarten and maybe first grade when we had parent days where they come in and they talk about their careers, right? Our parents come in and talk about their careers. That's a form of job exploration. So OVR can provide a more structured experience than that, where they're going to help them learn about those careers. Group shadowing, you know, this is all about getting kids out to work with local professionals and kind of shadow them for a day just to learn what it's like to work in that career. Travel training, community work instruction, and paid work experiences. This is all about helping your kids have that temporary job tryout. So they're basically working a temp job and they're getting paid for it out in the community. So these are really great ones. And you'll notice there's an asterisk mark on that bottom one. And you might have heard me say it can be kind of tricky to get in touch with OVR sometimes. You know, one thing I will say as someone who has worked with OVR for many years now is that they need help, right? They're overwhelmed to put it mildly. Unfortunately, they don't have the funding to provide all of these services at this moment. Their budget is just not matching the population and the services they need to provide. So they've actually had to cut back and just hone in on what is the most essential thing we can give to these students in that 14 to 21 age range. So paid work experiences are going to be the primary thing they're funding this year. And they're really going to prioritize those kids in high school who are getting ready to graduate so that they can go through a work experience before, because if you think about it, they are going to get exposed to self-advocacy training, independent living skills exploration, workplace readiness training, job exploration, all of these things, right? Through that real life experience of working a temporary job with supports. So that's the thing they're prioritizing now. And I will say, if you are a parent and you're trying to get in touch with your OVR counselor, it can be tough. Every district does have an OVR specialist that's supposed to be meeting with families and providing these services, but sometimes there's just one per district, and sometimes there's one counselor supporting multiple districts, so it can be difficult to get in touch with them. I would say if you're having trouble reaching out to them, call your local OVR office, right? Be that pest, call them every day until you guys can get signed up for their services, because like I said, they're just overwhelmed right now, and you can get these services. They are available. You just have to be you might have to advocate for them more than you might be used to. So OVR is a great resource, but you do have to take the lead in reaching out and getting in touch with them, because they just don't have enough people to be easily available all the time. But let's talk about how you can help, right? This is why you're here. Whether you're a teacher, an educator, or a parent, or an advocate, you know, how can you help the people in your lives develop social skills? Social skills, like any other skill, requires practice, right? That's the most important key. So the more exposure we can give to our kids, the more opportunities we can give them to practice their social skills, the better off they'll be, right? The stronger that skill will develop, just like any other skill. So you want to encourage your child and your student to take more of an active role in social settings. So for example, maybe you are used to ordering your child's meal on their behalf, right? A lot of times when I was young, my parents would order for me, especially when I was still ordering off the kids menu, right? And that was just how we did things in our life. But as we grew older, right, we were expected to order things on our own. So these little steps, right, these little steps of just giving more independence to our kids can play a huge role in developing their skills, whether it's something as simple as ordering a meal, maybe just pointing to the right item they want, encouraging them to ask questions in a polite and productive way with your waiter or waitress, right? That can be a huge teaching moment for them. But you can also do things like role playing less common scenarios, right? I mentioned job interviews. Job interviews suck, right? No one likes doing a job interview. There's so much pressure. There's so many expectations, so many unspoken rules in a job interview. And it's not something we can expose ourselves to all the time, right? Sometimes we have to really be mindful that for many of us, we probably, if we're lucky, we only go through like a dozen or so job interviews in our lives. So it's not a lot of opportunities to practice. So if we can simulate those, all of a sudden we have more opportunities to practice and prepare ourselves for these less common scenarios or just things that they're not ready to be exposed to yet, right? Same thing of college interviews. Any kind of scenario you can think of, consider role playing just so they have practice, they've gone through it. And so let's go through that together a little bit, right? When you are role playing, I think there are certain ways to approach, how we can teach these skills, really be intentional about the supports we're giving them and make it a really powerful teaching moment. So when role playing a scenario, I like to encourage my kids and that I'm supporting or my clients that I'm supporting to stop and think, right? Before they say anything, because a lot of us, we act on impulse, right? The first thing that pops in their head, we're just going to shout it out. Some scenarios, that's not always appropriate, right? So let's stop and think, what do we actually want to say, right? What are the good and bad choices? Are there things that are better for me to say? Are there things that are inappropriate for me to say or that might hurt, my odds of getting what I need out of this conversation? How can I implement the steps to a good choice? How can I practice that and make sure that I'm communicating clearly? And then also reflect with them, help them understand what makes that choice a good choice. How was what I chose to say better than that other first thought I had, right? And so we'll give you some examples. So let's say you are doing a job interview. Stop and think, why might I want to share my disability, right? Maybe you're doing a job interview and you're strongly considering disclosing your disability. Of course, it's always optional, but there are consequences to both sharing and not sharing, right? So maybe we want to think, hey, is it a good idea to share that I have a disability? I might need to ask for accommodations right here and now, or should I wait till later, right? So this is a good moment for your child to think, hey, should I actually think about that and just blurt out my disability and the accommodation I need now? Would that impact my chances of getting this job? Or would withholding that and not potentially not getting the accommodations I need hurt me more in the long run, right? That's a tricky scenario. Identify good and bad choices. What's a productive and appropriate way to disclose my disability? Do I need to give them my whole life story? Do I need to explain every little detail about my disability, or should I just explain, hey, I'm still going to be capable of this job that I'm interviewing for, but here are the tools I need to be successful, right? Is that a better way of sharing that information? Um, what are the best ways to implement that choice? And how can we reflect on those? This helped me get a job offer. So there's a lot of things we can practice with our kids, right? And just make sure that you're doing those steps to stop and think, help them identify good and bad choices, how to actually execute that and communicate what you need and then reflect on that whole experience with them so that they can learn and grow. So now we're going to talk about a couple of scenarios here. We've got role-playing academic scenarios. So, this is thinking about life after high school. Maybe you need to ask for class accommodations, do some group work with students, talking to your professor or instructor, speaking with school administration, right? These are just some common scenarios we could think of, but I'm sure there's more that might be more specific to your child and their needs should they decide to go to a vo-tech school or a college, right? So definitely consider what what new scenarios they might encounter, what they'll need to be able to advocate for themselves. Because we as parents and educators, as much as we want to be there every moment, we're not always going to be there, right? And it's better off in the long run if we give our kids the skills they need to do this on their own. So let's role play some of those with them. And going out in the community, right? Once they start living on their own and we still have our own jobs and our kids start becoming more independent, maybe they move out of the house, how can they talk to people in their community? Maybe they get lost, they need to ask for directions. If they have to talk to law enforcement, order food, paying for items, right? There's many, many scenarios that they can encounter when going out in the community once they're living on their own or just taking more independence in their life. And so we definitely want to prepare them for these common scenarios as well. And then last but not least, let's talk about work scenarios, right? We got job interviews. We've covered that a couple of times. But what about meeting a coworker, greeting a customer, reporting a complaint, asking for time off, right? These are things that we commonly have to go through. And there might be a certain etiquette or certain procedures we have to follow. One that sticks out to me is reporting a complaint. Maybe you have a problematic coworker. Unfortunately, many of us, we go through some kind of harassment or bullying, and that can be equally true for our students with disabilities as they join the workforce. What is the appropriate way to file a complaint, right? In a work setting. Maybe you have to follow up with HR, you want it documented in writing, you want to talk to your supervisor about that, right? These processes could be very new for a lot of our students. So we definitely want to role play that with with our kids before they start their job so that they come prepared. And there are many more scenarios that we can think of. This is just to get you started thinking about, what kind of discussions do you want to have with your students and your kids? So wrapping it up, adulthood comes with more exposure to a lot of different social scenarios that your student child has not experienced before. Learning how to navigate these conversations, how to behave, dress, and act in places like work, college, university, and just being out in the community can help you be more independent, more likely to develop friendships and connect with others, and get help when needed. So it's really important that we help our students and our kids practice and reflect with our child to build those social skills. We can take an active role in supporting our kids, right? It takes a village to raise anyone. So we should all step up and take an active role in developing those social skills and really consider what new scenarios we can help prepare them for. Now, I know this was a pretty brief PowerPoint, and I kind of went a little bit quick. So if you want to see a copy of this recording, a copy of this PowerPoint, or look at our previous topics, we covered everything from OVR services and waiver funded services to benefits counseling, all the way to social skills. You can check all of that here at our Padlet. That is a website where we've kind of kept everything in one nice convenient location for you guys. So if you want to see our previous recordings of our last sessions or this current session and all the resources tied to them, just scan this QR code or click this link, and hopefully someone in the chat can help me share the link for the Padlet and post it in the chat as well. But you can always access this at any time. And we're more than happy to share these resources with you.